The elected Dragonborn magistrate walks towards you, his robes flowing behind him.
Al-Bazir is at it again. He has kidnapped the Princess Hannah and taken her with his gang to a secret shrine called the Cavern of Rubies. Worse, we have reason to fear there is foul magics involved.
It is up to you to go stop them. The highlight of Matt Colville's Collaborous stream, for me at least, was the city of Zir, the Dragonborn city of glass forged from the surrounding desert where every wizard could vote. It immediately conjured feelings of Arabian Nights, high magic in the Islamic Golden Age, and I just fell in love with it. It was a real triumph of what we could create together on the stream. So what we're going to do is we're going to take what might be the most played dungeon of all time and then reskin it and re-level it for a one-shot adventure set in Zir. A one-shot adventure is a standalone adventure. It's not part of a larger campaign, and it's usually meant to be played in a single session, a single night of play. So we're going to look in the Lost Mines of Phandelver into Cragmaw Hideout. I'm going to call it Cragmaw Cavern because that's what I'm comfortable with, even though I know it's not the right name. The designers knew that this adventure was going to go into the starter set. They knew that this was going to be a lot of people's first exposure to D&D, and so they did a really good job of designing this dungeon to showcase what D&D can be. It's narratively really satisfying. They have a great job of doing setup and payoff. And they also do a great job of showcasing how players can make meaningful choices that really affect how the story and the adventure play out. You end up going to Cragmaw Cavern to look for Sildar, who has been kidnapped by some goblins. So you come to the mouth of the cave where you see 2 goblin guards and a stream of water trickling outside. Now, so here's a first choice for your players. They could either dispatch the goblins stealthily, or they could try to fight them, potentially setting off an alarm and alerting the rest of the dungeon. After dispatching the guards and going into the cave, the first room you come across has 3 wolves chained up in a small chimney. So there's a lot more going on in this room than what first meets the eye. The wolves could be just a light combat encounter, but there's also an opportunity for some roleplay and some creative thinking. Your players could try to seduce the wolves with food, or perhaps lure them to be quiet with music. There's also a dynamic element. If the characters ignore the wolves, after 3 rounds they'll break free and start attacking, potentially serving as an alarm for the rest of the dungeon. And even though it's just barely mentioned, there is a chimney that a player who really likes to explore might be able to get a sneak peek of the boss room later on. Back in the main part of the hallway, we come to the first payoff. If the players were not particularly careful, they may have alerted the goblins and a trap comes. Remember the stream of water from the outside? Where was it coming from? Whoosh! A gigantic flood comes out, wiping away your party, doing damage. The goblins had set a trap. In this hallway, your players can also see an overhead bridge. This is an element that you see a lot in video games. Tomb Raider does this, Skyrim, Zelda does this a lot, and it's fantastic. It entices your players to keep exploring. They see an area they cannot immediately access, but know, hey, if we keep going, we'll backtrack and be right there. So it's another setup. The next room is probably the best in the whole dungeon. The next room you come to is the Goblin Den. It starts off as a medium encounter, but as soon as you kill some goblins, most of them flee toward the boss room. Then it really morphs into a great roleplay encounter that really exemplifies what meaningful choice means in Dungeons & Dragons. The Goblin Lieutenant, Ymik, grabs Sildar, the captive you were looking for, and holds him over the edge of a deep pit with a knife to his throat. Ymik drags Sildar over to a ledge, puts a knife to his throat, and says, "Stop fighting and let's talk." It's a great moment. Ymik doesn't want you to just leave the cavern. He wants you to go to the next room and kill his boss. If you do this, he says, he'll let Sildar live. Otherwise, he'll die. This is great. This is a beautiful roleplay encounter. There's no clear answer. There's no right or wrong here. It's very gray. You don't know if you can trust Ymik. You're going to go to the next room and kill the boss anyway. Is it worth leaving Ymik alone with Sildar? If the characters try to keep on fighting, Ymik, true to his word, tries to slay Sildar, tossing him off into the ditch, dropping him to 0 hit points. So the players can face real consequences for their actions. What your players choose to do here has a real impact on how the rest of the story plays out. After deciding what to do with Ymik, the characters cross over the overhead bridge into the boss room and defeat Crawl the Bugbear. The final room, the boss room, is pretty straightforward. There's a bugbear, Crawl, who's a pretty deadly threat for first level characters, and he's got a pet wolf alongside with him. There's also the brazier and a chimney that led down to the wolf room. All throughout this dungeon, there are clues into what's playing on in the rest of the adventure. If you interrogate the goblins or talk to Sildar or maybe ruffle through some of their notes, you'll get clues about what's happening in the rest of the adventure, The Lost Mines of Phandelver. So now that we understand this adventure, we're going to reskin it and relevel it for Zir. So what we want for Zir is this high magic, high science, Middle Eastern Arabian themed fantasy. And we're going to look for our classic examples that we're familiar with. 1001 Nights, Alibaba, Aladdin, Ancient Egypt, Sinbad al-Bahar. We're going to think of our favorite scenes and the most memorable moments from these things. Open Sesame, The Cave of Wonders, Jafar's Staff, The Cave of Diamonds, the Magic Lamps. And then we're also going to go ahead and just do some Google image search and then write down some objects and some attire that you see wearing. Background objects and clothing are the most frequent things you're going to describe as a DM. So it'll be really useful to have a list pre-made to help you immerse your players in this setting. The first thing we're going to do is take all the goblins and make them dragonborn. That's going to make them a bit tougher because of the breath weapon. And then instead of using the goblin stat block, we're going to use a mixture of thug and alkalite stat blocks. That's definitely going to up their attacks and up their hit points, which is going to be more appropriate for our 5th level party. So we know that we can't just have them at a cave anymore. So let's do a temple. I'm imagining the Valley of the Kings or Petra. The first encounter is the 2 guards standing outside. So here's our first opportunity to insert one of our favorite scenes. In the story of Alibaba, the foolish brother gets trapped inside the cave because he cannot remember the correct grain that's the magic word. So here we're going to take that inspiration and do it with a twist, which is really the heart of the creative process. Taking something you know and doing it just a little bit differently. We're going to have these 2 guards standing outside, but the door to the cave, the door to the temple is sealed off shut. They're standing outside arguing because they cannot remember what's the correct grain. If you have them there arguing between each other,
What is the correct grain? I cannot remember the grain today. It was your job to remember today's grain. Now we are stuck here.
it gives you a great opportunity to immerse your players in a quick riddle. After killing these guards or scaring them off, what I'm going to do is make a puzzle. I'm going to have engraved on the door, Open Sesame. But I'm going to transcribe it. I'm going to transliterate it into Arabic script and then give the players a key. This is a fast riddle. Maybe it'll only take 5 minutes for them to solve. It's going to do a lot to make them feel like they're in this Arabian setting. Once they open the door, we can't have a stream be trickling out anymore, but we still want to have that trap. So instead of a flood, we're going to have a flood of sand. So our setup is going to be, we'll describe the floor as being slightly slanted with maybe a few grains of sand rolling down, and maybe a grate at the bottom to collect it. Instead of the 3 wolves, what I'm going to do is just add them all together. I'm going to make a 3-headed dog. I'm going to take the wolf stat blocks and just add all the hit points together, give it a ×3 multi-attack, and add +2 to all of its proficiencies. So if they fight, it's still a light encounter for their level, but the options to roleplay and think of a more interactive solution are still there. I'm also going to add to this room one other thing. This is a one-shot adventure, and so if a character dies, that player's not going to have any fun. They're just going to be sitting there for the next couple hours wondering what to do. So we're going to give them a workaround. In the movie The 10 Commandments, after the last plague is visited upon Egypt and Pharaoh's son dies, Ramses tries to bring the boy back to life by putting him on an altar to a god of the underworld. In the movie, that god is false. But in our game, we're going to have that statue work. It's going to be able to cast Revivify once a day if the players can figure out what the statue does with an Arcana check. Back in the main hallway, the sand trap might be triggered, but the bridge, instead of just having it be a rinkety-dink bridge like it was in the Goblin Cave, we're going to say that it's floating there by magic. We're also going to go ahead and light the room with some magic lamps and then describe hieroglyphs or really elegant script lining the walls, maybe with blue and white porcelain. Really giving it that Middle Eastern feel again. The next room is the same, except for goblins, we're going to have our alkalites and our bandits with breath weapons, which is going to be a fun tactical encounter for the more advanced players who can understand the resistances and the attacks. But instead of an old man Sildar being held captive, let's make it a young girl, Hannah. That's a good name. And then we'll also have, instead of Yimik, we'll have a bandit captain named Al-Bazir. So our bandit captain Al-Bazir is still going to want you to go into the next room to kill the boss, but maybe his motivation is a little bit different. Maybe he was just a simple thief. Maybe he doesn't want to have anything to do with what's going on in the next room. So before we go off into the boss fight, there's something else we need to consider. The whole time in the Lost Mines version, they were setting you up and giving you intelligence for the rest of the adventure. They were giving you hooks for the next plot. But because this is a one-shot, we're not going to have any of that. So we're going to have to add a hook of our own. Because there is no next adventure in a one-shot, we have to give the players another hook besides just rescuing the princess. So let's think about, maybe they're there to stop a ritual too. Better yet, their elected magistrate asked them to go ahead and stop this ritual. That explains why some of the acolytes are here. So if you interrogate any of the thieves, they might say, hey, we just teamed up with these bad guys. If you interrogate the acolytes and say, oh, Aldeo is coming. She will be coming soon. Aldeo Alakbaria is coming soon. We're working so hard to bring her here. Something along those lines. Again, this is a setup that when they get to the boss fight, that will be the payoff. So the last room, let's have, instead of just being a plain cavern with skins and crates, we'll have it be a little bit more fantastic. We're going to use one of our inspiration points, but instead of making it a cave of diamonds, we'll make it a cave of rubies. We'll be really sure to describe this. It'll be a fantastic location that will be really memorable. This ruby cavern could be another example of a payoff. Maybe in our introduction, we're going to say, hey, this name of the shrine is called the Ruby Cavern. And so they finally find it like, hey, here it is. Instead of a bugbear, I'm going to go ahead and use the enchanter stat block found in Volo's guide, but I'm going to give him a magic item, similar to Jafar's staff, that when he casts Charm Person or Suggestion, the player has disadvantage on their saves. The enchanter and whatever's left of the riffraff is going to be a pretty easy fight. But we're forgetting one thing. Maybe the ritual did succeed. The most iconic creature in Arabian mythology is the Genie, and we haven't had that yet. So that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to summon the powerful Deo Alakbaria. So it's going to be a two-part boss fight. As soon as they defeat the enchanter, we're going to give them a moment to rest and breathe and think they won, but then we're going to have a reversal, and Aldeo Akbaria shows up. Now, Aldeo is a CR11 creature, and so far our characters have gone through 3, potentially 4 combat encounters without the chance to rest. So this could turn deadly really fast. But we're going to give them a few ways out of it. We'll have the Deo, as soon as she reaches half hit points, she's going to use her plane shift to escape. So this reserves her highest level ability for something that's not doing damage to the players, and it's going to end the encounter before she gets too many attacks in. Additionally, if the players search the enchanter's body, they might find a tool of Genie control. Lastly, for a one-shot, what I like to do is I also like to build pre-made characters for the players. So I'm going to go through and find classes that are really evocative for our setting. The Wizard, obviously, but also the Arcane Trickster, and also the College of Swords from Xanathar's Guide, which is sort of a whirling dervish. And because this is a high magic setting, I'm going to go ahead and outfit them with a lot of really powerful magic items. Not ones that will deal a lot of damage, not combat items, but utility items, ones that create a feeling of magic as technology, and items that are really fitting for this setting. Things like Goggles of the Night, the Dancing Sword, and of course, a flying carpet. To prepare for this adventure, I'm going to go ahead and sketch the map. In the original, it was sort of a rough-drawn cavern, but here we're just going to make it all straight lines for the temple. It's easy to draw and doesn't change anything tactically. Let's go over our encounters. Between their introduction, getting the mission in the city, narrating a quick travel across the desert and arriving at the temple, and dispatching the 2 guards, solving the puzzle, that whole big chunk will probably take about 15 minutes. The room with the dogs, the chimney, and the statue, that's another 15 minutes. And exploring the main hallway and possibly getting hit by the trap is another 15 minutes. The medium fight that turns into the roleplay encounter is another probably about 45 minutes. And then the 2-part boss fight is another 45 minutes. You count in 10 minutes for everyone to get settled at the table, a 10-minute break in the middle, and then 10 minutes to chat at the end. That leaves us with about 2 hours and 45 minutes. That's a 15-minute wiggle room for 3 hours, which is perfect for a one-shot session of D&D. All right, so that's the video. Next, I think I'm going to show people how to find new players for their game. I know there are a lot of people who want to get into D&D, but they just can't find a group. I'm going to make a video talking about how I'm going to find new players to play this one-shot with me. Let me know what you think in the comments below.